Aghora 3. The Law of Karma. Introduction. It is always better to live with reality, because otherwise, without fail, reality will come to live with you. By the Aghori Vimalananda. If to be religious in the truest sense of that much misunderstood word is to thirst for water from reality's fountain, then to walk the spiritual path is to turn your compass toward its ever-flowing well. The organized religions which have set up camps downstream from that spring all provide sketchy maps that trace a single trail to the source. The one map illuminating all the tracks, leading spiritwards through the diverse terrains of existence, is accessible only through the world's sole dogma-free spiritual trekking agency, Aghora. Aghora, which literally means unagitated, teaches Aghoris, who are its practitioners, to focus and intensify their craving for reality until they learn how to transcend all that galls the Aghora in life. Then no internal or external stimulus, however ordinarily agitating, will be able to interrupt or interfere with their one-pointed guzzling of the nectar of being. I obtained my orientation toward reality from my mentor, the Aghori Vimalananda, who showed little regard for organized systems of belief. I have never believed in religion. Religions are all limited because they concentrate only on one aspect of truth. That is why they are always fighting amongst one another, because they all think they are in sole possession of the truth. But I say there is no end to knowledge, so there is no use in trying to confine it to one scripture or one holy book or one experience. This is why I say, when people ask what religion I follow, I don't believe in sampradaya, meaning sect. I believe in sampradaha, meaning incineration. Burn down everything which is getting in the way of your perception of truth. By Robert E Svoboda, from Aghora at the Left Hand of God, page 167. Aghoris who do their damnedest to stand up to reality without having to lean on any reassuring doctrine or creed always strive to do exactly what must be done at the moment when it becomes necessary. They learn what they need to know in the smashan, the cremation ground, worshipping death that they may die to their restrictions and be reborn into purity of perception. They accept with love everything that comes their way, knowing that whatever reality serves up is, after all, the meal that their karmas have created for them. The law of karma, which is one of the most profound and fiendishly perplexing of reality's axioms, is the law of cause and effect, the law of as you sow, so shall you reap. The oldest of the Upanishads expresses it this way: truly, one becomes good by good action, and bad by bad action. From Brihadaranyaka Upanishad 3.2.13. This law is better known to most of us as Newton's third law of motion. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. The mandate of this succinctly complex law regulates the potentially limitless implications of every small act performed by every actor within the manifested universe, meteor and microorganism alike. Everyone lives within the precincts of the ubiquitous law of karma, whether or not they accept its reality. Ignorance of this law is no defense in the court of cause and effect. As Lord Krishna declared in the Srimad Bhagavata, "Karma is my guru, nay, it is the Supreme Lord." Every physical or mental action you perform, and with which you identify yourself as the doer, becomes a karma for you, and produces a reaction which you will eventually have to experience. Like everyone else, Aghori or atheist, you consume at each moment of your life that portion of your karmic grain that has finally matured. Likewise, each of your self-identified actions or reactions today shapes your future by seeding yet further reactions. Every individual being is a karmic slate of coming attractions and repulsions. Though we all physically share the same earth space and earth time, our individual causative schemata create for us individual universes of experience. There are as many universes as there are beings, each locating the environment, war or peace, wealth or penury, misery or ecstasy, that each assortment of karmas requires. Since limitations of time and space prevent everything from happening in our world all at once, the law of karma schedules its events to occur just in time, every time, in each cosmos, large and small. Every interaction between two different universes of experience creates its own karma, which duly propagates its own reaction. The more strongly you identify with your karmas, the more closely your experience will conform to the reaction they promise. Though very few people ever graduate from quotient religion to authentic Aghora, everyone is free to make use of the truths that the world's Aghoris have sucked from reality's teat. Arguably, the most fundamental of these realizations is this: the essence of living with reality is to continually surrender to what is. You have already created your own personal universe with your karmas, and now you must live in it. Everyone who has sown the wind will eventually reap the whirlwind. However, most people try to ride out their karmic storms by barricading themselves inside psychological houses. No building, however waterproof, can withstand every tornado, earthquake, flood, and conflagration. Almost everyone, accordingly, finds himself or herself existentially homeless one day or another. Religions make good ideational roadhouses. You are free to shelter yourself under these roofs for as long as you like, or at least until a tempest blows in and causes that shelter to collapse. A good Aghori recognizes the innate flimsiness of all doctrinal thatch, and knows there is no security of any kind to be had in life except the surety that each of us is going to die. Many Aghoris forestall future personal derangement by emigrating to the smashan, where they can live their lives with nothing more substantial above their heads than God's never-failing umbrella. Vimalananda, who could be one of the most sophisticated of philosophers when the mood struck him, never mistook philosophy for reality. Time and again during the more than 8 years that I was with him, the faith he displayed in nature's ultimate beneficence brought home to me the value of capitulating to what is. Time and again I was wowed when I saw how his submission to reality solved his problems. It was that awe that inspired me to write this book. The law of karma, the unimaginable complexity of which has cowed the greatest of scholars, loses some of its ability to dismay when viewed through the prism of surrender. If having decided to surrender, you are willing to keep surrendering, and then you surrender some more, you will simplify your personal choreography to the more manageable, if still convoluted, process of resolving how, when, and what to yield. But though the simplification properly applied makes karma easier to work through, it in no way neutralizes the law of karma's power to mystify and consternate, nor does it render karma's logic any more linear, as the Mughal Emperor Akbar discovered in the following possibly apocryphal tale. The Emperor Akbar once developed a chronic, non-healing sore on his left pinky finger. It became so severe that his physicians eventually decided the whole finger would have to be amputated. The idea of losing a part of his body so upset the emperor that he sought a second opinion from his dear friend, confidant, and advisor, Raja Birbal. Birbal told his liege, "If the doctors say it has to come off, then it has to come off." Akbar told Birbal, "Here I am, a very religious man, who makes all the proper donations at the proper times, and still God is taking away part of my body? What have I done wrong?" Birbal replied, "Your Majesty, whatever God does is for the best." This remark irritated Akbar to no end. He grudgingly agreed to the operation, but decided simultaneously to teach Birbal a lesson. His opportunity came some weeks later, when the two of them, out hunting with a few retainers, came across a dry well. Akbar promptly commanded his men to deposit the astonished Birbal into it. When the emperor rode over on his charger and bent over the well's rim, Birbal shouted up to him, "Why are you doing this?" Akbar shouted down to his friend, "Birbal, whatever God does is for the best." Then, to let Birbal stew for a bit, he rode off alone to a different part of the forest, thinking, "Now we will see what good God can do for him there." Birbal, meanwhile, sat in the well, cursing his fate and wondering what was going to happen to him next. All at once, Akbar was surrounded by a band of ruffians. This particular pack of thieves selected only rich people as their victims, first robbing them and then offering them as human sacrifices. The highwaymen accordingly stripped Akbar of all his clothes and jewelry, and the bandit chief told him, "Prepare yourself for death." Seeing his end approaching, Akbar began to feel Birbal's absence severely. For Birbal had always been able to extract the emperor from otherwise hopeless situations. The gang leader meanwhile busily inspected Akbar, as he did all his prospective victims, to make sure that they carried no untoward sign. When he got down to Akbar's missing pinky, he shouted in dismay, "Egad, you're not whole! You are not fit to be offered to my goddess." Disappointed, the thug offered Akbar to don his clothes and ornaments quickly, and to depart thence. Being told that he was unfit to be offered, hurt Akbar's feelings and infuriated the ruler's ego. He maintained his presence of mind though, and as he dressed he thought to himself, "Birbal was right. Had I not lost my little finger, I would have been dead today." He mounted his horse and rode directly back to the dry well, and immediately ordered his waiting men to raise Birbal, who now was wondering why the emperor had changed his mind. Akbar began by apologizing to Birbal, and then told him, "I was so upset with you, I actually considered leaving you here to die. But did I ever learn my lesson? In truth, everything God does is for the best." The emperor then narrated the whole adventure to his amazed audience. Suddenly Akbar furrowed his brow and asked his friend, "But now tell me, Birbal, if whatever God does is for the best, what good came of your being in the well?" Birbal told him, "Isn't it obvious? Refuge of the world? If I had not been in the well, I would have been captured with you, and after the bandit had rejected you, I would have been next in line for sacrifice, and since I am not missing any parts of my body, he would have sacrificed me." "The Lord is truly marvelous," repeated Akbar distractedly, stroking his beard in wonder as they rode to the palace. Lessons in Simplicity. Vimalananda made "whatever God does is for the best" the refrain of his many adventures. For early in life, reality had shown him, as it had shown to Akbar and Birbal, how wise it is to cooperate with the universal flow. Vimalananda rarely tried to force his will onto the world. When he did, he usually lived to regret it. He openly declared his failings as warnings to others, and openly identified in others similar foibles when he felt that such pinpointing could teach valuable lessons. For the teaching of lessons was one of his great interests in life. So concerned was he that his listeners not misinterpret his message that he often pared his expressions down to their least common denominators. He often observed that unnecessary detail enmeshes people in Maya. The mind loves to learn. In fact, the Sanskrit word for mind is manas, that which measures or compares, and the power by which manas measures is Maya. In his opinion, when you try too hard to pin down a thing's detail, all you end up pinning down is its shadow, the illusion that is Maya. Vimalananda's penchant for reduction to fundamentals has led some people to complain that he willingly distilled karma's daunting intricacy into a relatively unsophisticated theory of brute retribution. Though there is of course more to the law of karma than simple formulation. If you killed Michael last time, Michael will kill you next time. This criticism seems to me to be unjustified. Though Vimalananda did not waste his time debating karma's theoretical minutiae, he was well acquainted with them, and he would speak in karmic technicalities whenever he had an audience who could appreciate them. However, he did expect that most people would misunderstand karma's precepts. I have seen little to suggest he was wrong to do so. The sad truth is that today the poor law of karma, which has long been center stage in India's theatre of thought, has reached its conceptual nadir in the world of post-industrial civilization. We of the late 20th century have mutated it into a mammoth fad, a causative catchword, a universal excuse. Modern people speak glibly of those with whom they have karma, of it being their karma, to get this promotion or buy that new trinket. Our philosophical carpetbaggers have even pressed it into the service of Californian used car dealer propaganda. Unfortunately, many Indian thinkers and systems of thought are just as guilty of willfully perverting karma's basic nature without the excuse of ignorance that our hedonistic Western lotus eaters might plead. Reality crouches perpetually before you in India, gazing steadfastly into your face, cuffing you purposefully about the head whenever you dare to turn away from it. Indian realities very inexorably have given innumerable seekers and thinkers no alternative to devoting their lives to the contemplation of its chief cause, the law of karma. Indian thinkers began in early antiquity to develop and test sophisticated hypotheses of karma, inspired by the revelations that India's rishis, meaning seers, gathered with their inner sight as they performed intense sadhanas, meaning spiritual practices. While certain of these ancient philosophies are still vigorous, others have lost their vitality and have been mummified into systems or fossilized into dogmas by heavy-thinking hair-splitters. Some Indian texts even apply shamelessly self-congratulatory sophistry to prove the validity of their competing versions of the law of karma with one-size-fits-all explanations. Karmic Theory. The pervasive temptation to oversimplify the law of karma rises from the collision of the irresistible force of humanity's innate need to comprehend cause and effect with the immovable object of karma's extreme reluctance to divulge itself to humans. Gahana karmano gati, meaning karma runs indescribably deep. The simple law of cause and effect sets into motion such a near infinity of past, present, and future ramifications for each purposely performed act that it effectively precludes a complete description of the entire karmic slate of even one living being. When it comes to comprehending the sum of the karmas of every living being, we can go nowhere at all without the systematizing help of a theoretical model. There is no lack of competing explanations of causation for any cogent explanation of cause and effect, including those of physics, chemistry, and biology, can function as a theory of karma. We could even elucidate into a theory of karma some psychological conjecture which details how specific events in the past influence an individual's present and may shape his or her future. But scientific causation notions are crimped by their materialism, which limits cause and effect observations to the physical reactions which arise from physical actions. Psychological theories are similarly defective to the extent that they restrict themselves to the limited domain of the psyche. A truly efficacious model of karma represents a system of causation relevant to all conceivable states of existence, to anything that can be named. Karma being so intricate, decent theories of karma are as difficult to objectively prove or disprove as in the theory of quantum mechanics. One practical difficulty with testing either theory is that cause and effect is only rarely linear. One cause sometimes produces one effect, but far more commonly, a number of cooperating, co-committant causes are needed to produce a single effect, and a distinct cause quickly spirals into a cascade of interconnected effects. Also, while neither sort of theory is inherently unprovable, neither can be observed by an external observer in the manner approved by scientific materialism. Both karma theory and quantum mechanics refuse to accept that observers can exist independent of the systems they observe. Spiritual science goes so far as to take the observer's own internal universe and its states as its experimental field. For it is within that field that karma is produced and stored. Fortunately, it is not my task to attempt to prove or disprove anything other than that my mentor, the Aghori Vimalananda, possessed his own unique vision of the law of karma, which he tried at all times to remain aware of and act in accordance with. Though many of his favorite spiritual processes are preached by certain recognized lineages of Aghoris, Vimalananda refused to denominate himself. Instead, he shopped the metaphysical mall, donning and doffing assumptions until he found one that resonated with his experience, which he would then wear so long as it continued to fit. Over time, he tailored for himself the philosophical garment which he wore while I knew him, apparel which was basically tantric in design. This makes the darshana, meaning philosophical vision, that underlies Tantra, is a good vantage from which to survey Vimalananda's worldview. Tantra. Among the beliefs that Vimalananda shared with orthodox tantrics are 1. That the one reality creates, underlies and weaves together the multiplicity of matter. The word Tantra derives from a root meaning to weave. 2. That the oneness of reality is clearly perceived only when all the many varieties of personal obstructions have been removed. 3. That these obstructions can be removed by manipulating the matter of which they are formed. 4. That there is no substitute for a personal guru who shows you your path by gifting you a spark of living knowledge. There is no Tantra without a guru. The matter from which we and our obstructions are created includes both the dense physical material from which our bodies are built and the thoughts, attitudes, and emotions that make up our minds. Tantric practice is karmic engineering within this field of name and form, orchestration of substance and action into result. First, you direct new causes against previous effects to nullify adverse influences on your awareness. Then you unleash yet further actions to negate the influence of the nullifying actions. While all tantras, Buddhist, Jain, or Veda inspired, like most Hindus, Vimalananda hated the word Hindu, play current karmas against existing karmas, the various tantric systems disagree over the question of how cause and effect mutually relate. While the Buddhists and certain Vedics, like the Mimamsakas, assert that cause and effect are separate from one another, other Hindu traditions aver that cause and effect are implicit in one another, even though they do not simultaneously exist in our world. According to this latter evolutionary interpretation, effect is nothing but cause seen in a different state. A seed causes the effect of tree, which produces seed that produces more trees. The totality of tree is a sum of all its states, all of which are equally real. Vimalananda espoused the second category of karmic theory, which is known in Sanskrit as Satkaryavada. He expressed the essence of Satkaryavada as cause is effect concealed, and effect is cause revealed. Satkarya Vada has two variants. The Sankhya school sees occurrences in the world as actual transformations, or parinama, while the school of Shankaracharya and his version of Advaita Vedanta sees worldly activity as nothing more than the appearance of transformation, or vivatarka. There are 5 major forms of Advaita Vedanta. Sankhya is the philosophical foundation of much of Ayurveda, which is an Indian medicine, and Jyotish, which is Indian astrology, and of most Puranas, which is a compendia of spiritual traditions, and Tantras. Vimalananda followed Sankhya in asserting that the world of duality in which karma exists is as real as the condition of absolute non-duality, which is the ultimate reality of the universe, and that each is implicit in the other, all in one, one in all. Sankhya. Sankhya sees the universe as a continuous evolution from a Big Bang event during which a sense of separateness develops within a portion of the singularity that is the one reality in unmanifested form. That portion of the one which sees itself as separate is known as Prakriti, meaning nature, and the remainder which remembers that all is one is referred to as Purusha. The law of karma comes into effect at the instant Prakriti separates from Purusha, the first act from which all other acts develop. It is an act motivated, it is said, by spontaneously arising desire within Purusha to produce individuals who might perceive and know it. Each atom of the cosmos contains within it a fragment of that singular consciousness who desired to experience. Consciousness continually evolves by projecting itself into physical vehicles. Though it is minimal in inert matter and maximal in humans, a smidgen of consciousness and its resulting scoop-on of self-awareness appears in even the densest matter. Human activity is valuable in the Sankhya system only to the extent that it makes us more aware of that undifferentiated consciousness. Prakriti forms, limits, and finitizes. After projecting from oneness, she evolves into undifferentiated transcendent intelligence, or Mahat, which partitions itself into individual parcels of Ahamkara, the force which produces I-ness in an organism. Ahamkara, literally the I creator, which gives living beings that sense of individual existence without which no further differentiation could occur, possesses 3 gunas, or attributes: Sattva, meaning equilibrium; Rajas, meaning activity; and Tamas, meaning inertia. Sattva is the internalizing I, the subjective consciousness which resides within a being, revealing its environment. From Sattva, the innate nature of the thinking mind, develops the 10 senses. The 5 senses of perception, hearing, touch, sight, taste, and smell, through which we take in from the world, and the 5 senses of action, though which we put out into the world. Speech, which represents all form of communication; hands, creative action; feet, which is locomotion; genitals, which is reproduction; and anus, which is elimination. Sattva is the most conscious of Ahamkara's 3 qualities. Rajas is the externalizing I, the active I, always on the move, searching for something with which to self-identify. Tamas is the objectifying I, the expression of unconscious individuality which veils consciousness as it evolves into the 5 objects of the senses: sound, touch, form, taste, and odor. These in turn produce the 5 great elements, or the Pancha Mahbhutas: space, air, fire, water, and earth, which are the building blocks for everything that exists in the manifested universe, including the physical bodies of living beings. The Sankhya philosophy maintains that embodied life is the functioning together as one unit in one place at one time of the 5 great elements: the 10 senses, the thinking mind, ahamkara, and the intellect, all enlivened by the individual soul, which is a reflection within the field of matter of the cosmic Purusha. Of these, only the Purusha itself is wholly and forever outside the field of the law of karma. Everything else that exists within the entirety of the aggregate of all possible universes is a form of matter, which makes it subject to action and reaction. Purusha is pure, passive, present consciousness, which no more interacts with the events it perceives than a movie screen interacts with the pictures projected upon it. All forms of action, including all mental functions, are orchestrations of matter within the closed cause and effect system that is the Prakriti field. All secondary distractions, male, female, body, mind, rationality, intuition, are significant only within Prakriti and have not the least effect on Purusha consciousness itself. Sankhya is, in a sense, a species of materialist philosophy, in that it teaches that even the most inconsiderable thought is as material as the doornail, and that all thinking, however hasty and offhand, is action which must create reaction. Even awareness itself is a karma-producing activity when your ahamkara, the force which self-identifies, identifies with it. Inaccurate perceptions encourage tighter bondage. Proper perception promotes freedom. As ahamkara solidifies your individual identity, it also solidifies your attachments to your previous karmas and your current actions. All the actions that you have performed and with which your ego self-identified act as seeds for karmic reactions, each of which will take its own time to mature and bear fruit. Ahamkara plants its seed in the ethereal nursery known as Karana Sharira, meaning causal body. The karmic seeds, which have collected in the causal body, lie quiescent until it is time for them to sprout. Once they sprout, their course becomes predestined. As they mature, they produce fruit which filters down into your Shukshumna Sharira, meaning astral body. Each karma induces your astral body, which is composed of your conscious, subconscious, and unconscious minds, to induce your Stula Sharira, meaning physical body, to put yourself into the proper place and time to enjoy the pleasant or unpleasant results of your past actions. In general, then, your physical body reflects the effects of your past actions, while your astral body mirrors your present day existence. Your causal body is your future. It determines how and where you will continue your evolution. 4 karmic categories. Although the cause and effect relationship is essentially an indivisible whole, we can, for easier comprehension, partition it into 4 categories: Sanchita, Prarabdha, Kriyamana, and Agma. Sanchita, meaning heaped together, karma, is the sum of all past karmas, known and unknown, that appear in your causal body nursery. It is Sanchita karma that prompts some Indians to claim that the ways of karma are unfathomable. Unknown actions include those performed in past lives. Prarabdha, meaning set in motion karma, is that portion of Sanchita karma which is ready to be experienced by an individual during this lifetime, the fruits which have ripened and are ready to be consumed. Sanchita and Prarabdha karmas are in a sense destined or fated as the product of past actions that have matured. However, they are truly inevitable only to the extent that they are not modified by kriyamana, meaning being made karma, or agami, meaning coming or arriving karma. Agami karma is our capacity to envision future actions, while kriyamana karma is what we do at any moment with our capacity to will and to create. You cannot destroy your past, but neither need you permit your past to manipulate you like a puppet, since you can alter your future by acting in your present. Kriyamana karma can also include agami karma, and kriyamana karma and agami karma can together be termed vartamana karma, meaning current or living. Each of these types can be arabdha, meaning begun or undertaken, or anarbdha, meaning not commenced or dormant. A famous agricultural analogy to this system of karma classification equates karma with rice. This makes Sanchita karma the already grown rice that has been harvested and stored in the granary. Prarabdha karma is the small portion of that stored rice that has been removed from storage, husked, and ready for cooking and eating. Kriyamana karma is the rice that is now being planted in the field to produce a future crop. 3 karmic intensities. Though some texts use the Sanskrit words karma and daiva, meaning fate, interchangeably, fate and karma are not synonymous. The human condition always arises from the dynamic coalition of fate and free will, not by either on its own. No one is ruled only by fate, as some Indians insist, and no one's life is wholly malleable by free will, as some New Agers claim. How much agama and kriyamana effort you will need to modify your fate will depend on how intense is the prarabdha karma in that area of your life and, to a reduced extent, in the lives of all those other beings with whom you share collective karma, your family, extended family, friends, neighbors, fellow country persons, nation, and planet. Tradition distinguishes 3 degrees of intensity in prarabdha karma. These may apply to one, many, or all areas of your life. Dridha, aridha, and adriha. Dridha, meaning fixed, karmas are so intense they are non-changeable. They create those seemingly fated events, pleasurable and painful, that either occur despite all our efforts to avoid them or fail to take place despite all our efforts to create them. The good or bad results produced by dridha aridha, meaning fixed, unfixed, karmas, can be changed by anyone who is willing to apply the concentrated creative will needed to change them. In the absence of any sustained effort, their predicted results will appear. Adridha, meaning unfixed karmas, are so easily altered that you may do more or less what you please within reason in these areas of your life. This current life of yours is fundamentally a swim across the river of your prarabdha karma. If your prarabdha current is dridha, it is likely to overpower you and sweep you away, even if you are a strong swimmer. If you and your current are of roughly equal strength, you will face a dridha adridha situation, and will probably make it across your river if you swim like the devil. When the current is weak, your karmas are adridha, and you are unlikely to be imperiled, even if you swim poorly. Free will operates here, as elsewhere, with each of your decisions. Where and when to enter the river, how fast to set your pace, what stroke to use. Each act of free will adds to your eventual fate. If you use up your free will early on, if you exhaust yourself just before you reach the rapids, you may find you have nothing remaining at that crucial moment when you need your reserves to try to cheat your fate. In the world of finance, non-callable investments pay back their principal, and fixed-term debts instruments require repayment at term only, not before. Until you invest, your money is as fluid and free as your will. But at the moment you invest, you lock yourself into a result that has become fated. Banks may fail, technologies may innovate, interest rates may skyrocket, markets may crash, but your eventual payoff or payment is locked in. The result is now effectively destined until you can use your free will to do something with these investments or loans during their terms. You will alter your fiscal destiny if you can sell your investments or create derivatives from them, or if you can pay off your higher interest loan with one bearing a lower rate of interest. Whether or not you will be able to make such alterations will depend on the inherent value of the investment or debt, prevailing market and general economic conditions, and related factors. How possible or impossible it is for you to make such changes, i.e., how fixed or unfixed your monetary destiny is an expression of the degree of karmic intensity in your life in the pecuniary sphere. Similar degrees of karmic intensity apply to every realm of your existence. Adriha health karmas, for instance, produce diseases which run their course and disappear on their own, unless you use your free will to do things to reinforce them. Dridha adriha health karmas may produce chronic illnesses which can usually be controlled with the help of intensive therapies, but will continue to worsen if neglected. Dridha karmas in the health realm tend to produce conditions which refuse to respond even to the most heroic treatments. Probably the most important of the karmic intensity factors is the self-awareness, the force that allows you to self-identify with your actions. The more you are self-aware, the more effectively individual you can be. Humans who appear to possess more self-awareness than do most other life forms are better able to self-identify with their actions consciously, intently, and passionately. This allows us to sow and reap more than other sentient beings can. Reincarnation. The karmas that you perform in dizzying number, think of all the things you accomplish in the space of an hour, grow and mature at different rates, making one lifetime insufficient for you to experience all their effects, unless you happen to be immortal. Karmic theory, therefore, proposes that beings die and are again reborn, reincarnated, to continue working out pending reactions. What transmigrates, of course, is Prakriti, and the principles which dissolve from her. Purusha, who is eternally free, is never bound to or released from a body. Purusha's sole pastime is to silently observe as the mass of karmas that have accumulated in your causal body steers you from life to life, permitting you to re-interact with those who helped you to create the karmic bed in which you lie. Each time you are ready to be reborn, your prarabdha karmas forge for you a mind and body and a milieu in which they will live. Your progress in each life is fertilized and watered by the karmic reactions that support you, and is interfered with by karmas that act against your interests. Finally, your terminating karmas catch up with you and kill you. The thought you think at the moment of death, a thought which will reflect either the force of the strongest karmas you performed during the lifetime, or your state of mind as you lie dying, or the force of your habits, or whatever reaction has just matured to join your karmic queue, sets you up for your next birth. Reincarnation is so handy a concept that it has been an integral part of almost all Indian philosophies since ancient times. Implied in the Vedas themselves, its earliest clear formulations appear in the Brihadaranyaka, Chanda Yoga, and Svetasvatara Upanishads. By the time of the Bhagavad Gita, reincarnation has become one of Indian thought's central concepts. The stories in the Jataka tales, for example, are Gautama Buddha's experiences in previous existences, which he used to teach his disciples. Reincarnation was used in Ayurveda to explain incurable diseases, congenital deficiencies, and other inborn physical, economic, and social handicaps. Ayurveda generally tried to put a positive spin on the experience by advising sufferers, advice is a karma, to be of good cheer and use their free will to try to improve their health, now in expectation of an improved physique next time around. Ancient India's hegemonistic priests used this same doctrine of karma as a negative model to try to keep the majority of the common people in subordinate social positions. The priests advised the peasants that their future living conditions would improve if they would avoid rocking the karmic boat in the present, and promised the lower castes a happier future for themselves if they would pay priests to perform purifying rituals on their behalf. Venal priests and their willingness to sell karmic indulgences were one reason that Vimalananda hated organized religions. Another reason was their tendency to confuse karma with sin. While sin is a violation of the rules of your society, religion, or affinity group, karma is an innate property of the universe. If your religion enjoins you to, say, slaughter an infidel, then failing to do so will be a karma. To refuse an act is also an action. That may be a sin. By doing so, you are likely to escape sin and will gain some good karma for living up to your cultural responsibilities, but you will also incur the probably bad karma involved in taking a life. The Vedas and Tantras, which teach that black magic is dangerous, unwise, and productive of evil karma, also indicate that you may resort to it when you find yourself in that condition of extremity, when it alone may save you or those who depend on you. Your distress will not exempt you from the karma involved, but it will at least ensure that you performed it for a worthy cause. Dharma. Evil karma is evil for you because it sets you up today for a fall tomorrow. As one Tamil woman put it, karma means that we are punished not for our actions, but by our actions. Quoted in O'Flaherty, page 37. A predator in one birth needs to return as prey to earn both the points of view needed to round out the whole experience. But evil karma did not become sin until the lawgivers made it into sin. Until then, it was adharma, meaning against dharma, a state which encompasses all acts that impede or pervert the current of your existence. Dharma, which some people mistranslate as duty, others as religion, and yet others as vocation, is really doing what you are born to do. Conforming to your dharma means following that path through life and performing those actions that best agree with you as an individual in the context of the environment in which you exist. Dharma is the universal law which makes a thing what it is. The dharma of the moon is to shine, of volcanoes to erupt, of boats to float, and of hyenas to laugh. Horses run, whinny, and toss their manes because it is their dharma to do so, not because they feel any moral obligation in that direction. Adharma is neither sin nor evil. It is simply a non-conformity with the nature of things, a crime against harmony. Plants, animals, minerals, and the things constructed for them possess unambiguous dharmas to the extent that they exist independent of human society. Human dharma is more equivocal. It involves aligning the dharma of an individual's personal prarabdha karmas with the consensus dharma constructed by society onto which he or she was hatched. To effectively follow your dharma as an individual human, you need to know how much you must conform to the demands of your community. Between the two poles of human adharma, an all-consuming sociopathic disregard for human association, and a fanatical subsuming of self into group, lies a catwalk of dharma above a swamp of adharmic dissonance. One false step in either direction from the straight and narrow path, and you plop into adharmic muck, either by violating the tenets of your personal consonance or by transgressing the rules of rapport that someone else has set. Everyone's road to reality is personalized, for one person's dharma is another person's adharma. Dharma precedes karma. For actions which conform to your dharma are as likely to give you good reactions as actions which disagree with your dharma are likely to yield disagreeable results. Humans are social animals. Most people find their paths to dharma within the context of a society. However, there are a few whose dharma it is to live apart. The dharma of such renunciates is to be dead to the world. Any renunciate who gets involved in politics, and some do in India, thus commits a crime against dharma. While it is against almost everyone's dharma to live in the smashan, Aghoris find it agreeable to do so because it is their dharma to live there. A good Aghori is always fanatically intent on trying to act in harmony with his personal dharma. The concept of natural dharma prevailed in India until the day the lawgivers decided to equate dharma with religion. Dharma now shifted from an innate nature, knowable by the introspective, to an external, moralistic, socialized construct maintained by lawgivers. The early lawgivers were probably looking to simplify life for their outer-directed flock by creating rules of dharma to follow. For it is impractical for most individuals to know cause and effect in detail. But these rules deteriorated into dogma, and sin came to be defined as violations of these rules. The Manusmriti, a famous Dharma Sastra, which is a treatise on dharma in its incarnation as Hindu religious law, speaks of karma, but focuses on sin when it assumes rebirth to be necessary to complete the results of many actions. The text, which sees reincarnation as an action's first and most important karmic consequence, also advises the prompt performance of penance in hope of modifying the results of these sins. It details several sorts of rebirths expected for specific crimes or states of being, according to 5 different karmic payback systems and a number of miscellaneous rules. Thieves are, for example, reborn as a variety of animals, and those who fail in their specific caste duties descend into the wombs of the hungry ghosts, or pretas. Theft from a brahmana, who is a member of the priestly caste, is punishable by many years in terrible hells, after which the opportunity to take a degraded incarnation will finally arise. The ungrateful wife returns as a jackal. There is no mention of any punishment for a husband's lack of gratitude. Though many people today are cheerily convinced that once you become human, you will always return to earth as a human, most authorities in ancient India concluded with Manu that you may well descend the evolutionary path before you again ascend it. The Buddha himself offered this discouraging analogy. A blind turtle who lives at the bottom of a vast ocean surfaces only once each century. On the surface of that ocean sits a storm-tossed ring of wood. You are as likely to be reborn as a human as the turtle is likely to stick his head precisely through that ring of wood when he rises next. Karma's mechanism. The Dharma Sastras are so ardent to present their retaliatory systems that they pay little attention to another pressing question, viz., the technique by which karma is stored and rebirth occurs. Patanjali's yoga system teaches that each intentional act creates a karmic residue, which is a karma shaya, which will conform either to dharma or adharma. Each residue has various samskaras, which are dispositional traces, which produce numerous results, including 2 types of vasanas, which are residual impressions. While one sort of vasana stores the memory of the act, the other produces kleshas, which are afflictions. These usually erroneous conceptions cause people to remain in bondage to their karmas by spurring them to create yet further karmic residues. Even the memory of a partial incarnation can fasten you more firmly to error if you cannot digest the experiences you had therein, which is why nature ordinarily will not permit you to remember your past lives until you are in no danger of being overwhelmed by them. When a person dies, her jiva, which is the sum of her unactivated karmic residues and their attached samskaras and vasanas, gather together within her awareness field, prepares for rebirth. The residues determine jati, which is the kind of body, example a tiger or human, ayus, which is lifespan, and the varieties of bhoga, which is pleasure or pain, that the new body will enjoy during its life as each residue matures, vipaka, to give its fruit. The nature of our karmic fruit depends substantially on how we use ahamkara to identify with our actions, which depends in turn on the relative balance of the three gunas in our personalities. Until a human can completely self-identify with the absolute Purusha, his or her human's awareness is itself a substance, a form of matter that possesses gunas. This matter interacts with other forms of matter, either to bind pure consciousness more firmly to inaccurate perception, or to release it somewhat, that it may shine freely forth by prying apart those bindings. When sattva predominates, a person performs karmas without becoming attached to their results. People who act from passion, blinded by desires, evince a predominance of rajas, while tamas predominates in those who act without thinking. Only those whose minds are fixed solely on the absolute remain untouched by the three gunas. In the words of the greatest of Puranas, the Srimad Bhagavata, the Shastra, meaning text, that one studies, the water one uses, the people one consorts with, the place where one is habitually found, the time of day that one favors, the karma one performs, the sacrament that one receives, the object of one's contemplation, the mantra that one is initiated into, the kind of purification that one practices. These influence one's gunas. The images among which we exist are formed when guna patterns gets multiplied by vasana, produced memories, and their associated conceptions, erroneous or otherwise. Images can be weak or strong, spiritual or mundane, altruistic or selfish, creative or destructive, intellectual or emotional, sensual or chaste. Each of us continually spawns thought forms as we attract the thought forms of others. Images of similar nature resonate with and reinforce one another according to the universal law of attraction. Like continues increasing like until the force of an image becomes so strong that its pressure on the mind can no longer be withstood. When it projects, the image's owner, acts out the image in the real world. People can be possessed by their own images, by those of their families, fortified by shared genetics, by those that assemble in the psychic atmosphere of an individual's familial, local, and national environments, or by combinations of all the above. Images can become so strong that they propagate themselves from generation to generation. Indeed, we see this daily in locales like the Balkans and the Middle East. Once an image is created, it cannot be destroyed. Its physical representations will disintegrate. Its energy can dissipate or bleed away, but its name and form shall not pass away until the universe passes away. Though most modern people think of material things are real, even though they can be destroyed in a matter of moments, it is imagination, memory, and the other creations of the mind that are really real. Everything that has ever been thought, imagined, or done has left its mark on the cosmos and can be recalled to awareness by anyone who knows how to recall it. Previous incarnations are also subject to recall, although there is no guarantee that what you may recall is what really happened to you. Your remembered incarnations might equally well be images from your imagination, images from someone else's imagination, images from the lives of archetypal beings, or experiences of an ancestor's incarnations. A superb example of the mysterious relationship between self-identification and incarnation appears in the compendium known as the Yoga Varsishta. A certain spiritual aspirant had, by dint of meditation, so purified his mind that he gained the power to materialize his thoughts. One day, when he was tired of meditating, he imagined himself to be an illiterate fellow, which he instantly became. This dream being, who felt he had the name of Jivata, wandered about in his dream world until one day he got drunk and slept. While sleeping, Jivata dreamt he was a Brahmana, who dreamt he was a king, who dreamt he was an emperor, who dreamt of being an Apsaras, who are celestial dancing damsels, who dreamt of being a deer, who dreamt of being a creeper, who envisioned itself as a bee, who began to drink the nectar from the creeper's own flowers. The bee saw an elephant on which it contemplated, becoming thereby an elephant, which was captured by a king. When the elephant saw a hive of bees, it remembered its past birth and became a bee, which became a creeper, which became a swan. While the seeker was meditating on the swan, death collected him, and his consciousness entered the swan's body. When that swan beheld Rudra, who is the god of death and transformation, it thought, "I am Rudra," and became Rudra, who went to the abode of Rudra and recognized what had occurred. Rudra proceeded to where the aspirant's body lay and revived him, at which point the seeker saw that he was in fact Rudra and remembered all that had happened. When the pair revived Jivata, they all three realized that they were in reality only one. When they awakened, the Brahmana and the king and the swan and all the others, they all grasped the truth that they were all the same and were all Rudra. Then the Rudra, who knew fully that he was Rudra, sent the rest of them all back to the world to play out their parts in the grand dharma of Maya, until they returned to him at the end of their apparently individual existence. Runanu Bandhana. One persistent question about reincarnation's grand design is, how exactly does that jiva get into the body of the plant, animal or human through whose womb it will be reborn? Probably the most ancient, explicit explanation of transmigration from the Vedic period appears as the 5-fire doctrine, or the Pancha Gin Vidya. According to this scheme, the properly propitiated souls of the dead proceed to the sphere of the moon, where they eventually become soma, or lunar nectar. Then they fall to earth as rain, which produces food, which, when eaten by humans, produces semen, which finally becomes another human being. The scenario, however, is rather hazy on how one's bad and good actions influence the process and its results, and how the jiva locates the right raindrop that will land on the proper plant that will enter the appropriate parent for it. Presumably it has something to do with the universal law of attraction. Vimalananda, who was not only concerned about which raindrop you may have boarded on your journey here, did believe that jivas find their parents via the law of attraction. Karmas are not performed in a vacuum. Performed action always has an object, however obscure. Energy or Shakti of all kinds flows when it has some destination to flow to, just as electrical energy flows only when a circuit is created. Your action creates a relationship with its object, be it of dense or subtle matter. Even something so seemingly insubstantial as a thought can act as an action's object. Vimalananda called the relationship thus created Runanu Bandhana, meaning binding karmic debt. The energy flux that your action initiates creates a debt or runa that is payable to you if you sent energy to your object, and that you must pay if you extracted something from that object. Every action creates another tie that binds, another band that will draw you back towards that object, so that you can square up your karmic account when the residue matures. Blessings and curses bind you to whatever you have blessed or cursed. If they are strong enough, they will take on lives of their own and pursue you. Thought Runanu bandhanas, which create obsessions when they draw their creators to them, are equally adhesive. Throughout your life, you will be drawn to the people, places, and things with whom you have Runanu bandhanas, and when you are ready to be reborn, you will draw automatically, as if it were, to those parents with whom you have some karmic affinity, with whom sufficient runa bonds have accumulated. If karmas were numerical quantities that could be added and subtracted, life would become easy and predictable. All you would need to square up a karmic account would be to total the outstanding karmic credits and debits, and then pay them off or be paid off accordingly all at once. But this is not feasible, since each significant residue among the astronomical numbers of karmas that we set in motion and then quickly forget about must be settled separately. The fate that is built into your Runanu bandhanas will continue to draw you into those situations in which your karmic residue can work themselves out, and you will still be able to use your free will to try to alter or navigate the vasanas that they create. These transactions will continue indefinitely, birth after birth, until you exhaust your causal body's stock of karmic residues. Karmic transfers. While there seems to be no theoretical limit to an individual's capacity to self-identify with new substances, actions, and situations, the question of transferring the karmic residues of already self-identified action from one being to another is a little muddier. Some texts refuse to accept that one person might experience the results of another person's actions, while other texts insist that this must be so. Vimalananda's position was that both situations can occur, since no one can become so subsumed into communal reality that all individuality is irrevocably lost. No one in our world becomes wholly independent until he or she is freed of all need to consume all nourishment from the environment. What makes it impossible to completely dissect an individual's karma from that of his or her community is the fact that each person exists in a fluid continuum between two opposing poles. That is, community benefit, individual benefit, transactional life, philosophical life, this world, other world, householder, renouncer, creation, dissolution, pravritti, nivritti, dharma, moksha. The Vedas placed great weight on genetics and community. They assumed outright that the members of a family or clan share with one another both their individually performed karmas and those performed in concert. Some later texts, however, taught that an individual's karma is separate and unshareable. They therefore prohibit karmic transfer. A man reaps that at that age, whether infancy, youth, or old age, at which he had sowed in his previous birth. A man gets in life what he is fated to get, and even a god cannot make it otherwise. From Garuda Purana, page 68. Early Buddhism took an individualistic approach. Each being must be an inland unto himself, working out his own salvation. Meritorious action well laid up is a treasure not shared with others. From McDermott, page 190. Mahayana Buddhism, though, returns to a community-based view of karma with its bodhisattva ideal. A bodhisattva resolves to take on the burden of all suffering and to offer his store of merit to others. Those who have the ability naturally produce and donate good karma. Those who need it receive and enjoy it. Later Hindu traditions, particularly those of the bhakti or devotion sects, also swung back from rugged karmic individualism toward shared karmic experience. Renouncers and householders both have their place in the world. Renouncers cannot exist without householders to feed, clothe and shelter them. However, a culture becomes totally and unattractively materialistic if it is composed wholly of householders. Back and forth, to and fro, Indian philosophers have argued the advantages and disadvantages of sharing your karma with others. Living in a community requires attention to its dharma as well as your own. It requires interactions with other community members in which you will be exposed to the karmic residues of others and vice versa. Food and sex are two salient ways through which karma can be shared. The Manusmriti 6.58 mentions that even a jiva mukta, someone who has been liberated while still alive from the need for rebirth, can become bound with the fetters of some samsara, the universe of manifested existence, by accepting food from the wrong hand. A wife's sexual loyalty is said to be integral to her husband's karma. But while a chaste wife can compensate for her husband's sins, a man can also be destroyed by his wife's concupiscence. Consanguineous ties are of immense significance. One rule of thumb in Jyotish states that from birth until age of 7, a child mainly experiences the results of her mother's karmas, and from age 7 to 14, her father's karmas. Only after age 14 and puberty does she come into her own karmically. Transfer of merit within families appears in many Vedic rituals, including the Pinda offering, which is made to appease potentially angry or harmful ancestors. Karmas can also be reassigned in the opposite direction. The Kaushitaki Upanishad describes how a son inherits his dying father's karma. Pravritri and Nivritri. All these swaps promote pravritri, which is further development of worldly entanglements and future reincarnation, if the exchangers identify themselves with their exchanges. Minimizing swaps and or failing to identify with them promotes nivritri, which is withdrawal from the world of action. Vimalananda preferred nivritri, but not at the expense of neglecting to pay off any residual runanubandhanas. Though there is a general perception that Indians as people are otherworldly, this slant is noisily preached now in certain Indian spiritual circles. It is not always thus. The disdain for the world of matter regularly preached by followers of Shankaracharya's impersonal Vedanta, is even today less predominant a worldview among Indians than is belief in the efficacy of worshipping a loving, personal God who can help us both in the here and now and in the hereafter. Pravritri and Nivritri both date from the Vedas, which advise the performance of all manner of sacrifices for the achievement of all manner of specific ends, both in this world and the next. For many centuries, however, most of those who sought to follow the path towards Nivritri, which culminates in moksha, meaning the cessation of the necessity for rebirth, have tried to isolate themselves from mundane community and the karmic transactions community inevitably arouses. By renouncing the world, such people become sannyasis. Sannyas literally means coma. So a sannyasi is, or should be, literally comatose to the world. Sannyasis try to minimize their actions of their many bodily and mental functions as they retreat from their worldly obligations. Until they become enlightened, however, the spiritually comatose retain their individual causal bodies and karmic slates. Moreover, they continue to share karmas with their fellow sect members to the extent that they imbibe ascetic power and spiritual energy, or tapas and tejas, from their gurus, and enjoy the aid and comfort of their fellow disciples. Clear-thinking people may be disheartened and disgusted by the implications of the karmas we perform for self-preservation, including our dogged rape of nature. These karmas stretch from the destruction of the wilderness to the swindling of our domesticated plants and animals to work for us for slave wages under savage conditions. We breed and propagate these species only to gobble them down with very little benefit to them or to the nature who is their mother. These karmas teach us humans in turn to gull one another. Fraud was at the basis of our present-day agricultural and stock farming industries. Among humans, exchange took the form of mutual deceit, the start of which was buying and selling. Therefore, the basis of trade is fraud, trickery, and deceit. There is no profit without a type of fraud. A totally fair exchange leaves you with a profit of zero. From Engler and Hayashi, page 124 to 125. Running away from a duplicitous human society is, however, rarely an effective strategy. The demoralized usually act dispiritedly, and usually collect dispirited results. The renunciation that is of value happens automatically, whenever the karmas that detain you in your world have become depleted. As Vimalananda iterated and reiterated, if you have to think about renouncing the world, you are not ready to do so. When your interest in worldly activities drops away by itself, you will automatically move on to the path of Nivritri, and only then will you be successful in following that path. Until then, there will be no end to karma in this lifetime. Human sacrifice. Diligent research into the nature of cause and effect permitted the seers of the Vedas, who well understood the necessity of action in life, to evolve methods through which they could achieve specific ends through the willful performance of specific karmas. These methods, called yaga or yajna in Sanskrit, and referred to in English as sacrifices, feed and satisfy deities and other ethereal beings with prana or life force, transported to them via the fragrance of the smoke from the burnt offerings of consecrated plants or animals. Sacrifice is a prominent feature in many ancient religions, including Judaism, and continue to be performed today in India. All but a few of these are, however, highly simplified versions overseen by priests who no longer understand what they are doing. Sincere sacrificers avoid fraud by ensuring that the beings they sacrifice receive some benefits as well. When a Vedic ritual is properly performed, the evil karma that Vedic sacrificer incurs by killing his victims is negated by the good karma for all that the ritual engenders. While goats, horses, bulls, alcoholic beverages, and the juice of the soma plant have all been used in Vedic sacrificial ritual, the archetypal victim is a human. At the beginning of its explanation of the Agnihotra sacrifice, for example, the Vedic text known as the Shatapa Brahmana states clearly that a human is the best sacrifice of all. Another text provides a mantra to be used when you accept a severed human head. No one knows how often humans were offered in Vedic sacrificial rituals, or whether they ever were. But there is little doubt that human sacrifice did occur in ancient India. We find evidence in works like the Mahabharata, which relates the story of King Somaka, who was so worried that his only son might die that he had the boy sacrificed in order that 100 of his wives might conceive. The Janaka tale called The Folly of Garulati describes a human sacrifice performed to protect a city gate. In Simhasana Dvatrim Shati, meaning 32 tales of the lion throne, the semi-mythical king Vikramaditya barely escapes becoming a victim himself. In historical times, the thugs made human sacrifice their religion, and isolated cases continue to come to light in India even now. Self-sacrifice. Though Vedic sacrificers have not used human victims for many centuries, sacrificial symbolism continues to pervade much of Hindu ritual. The coconut, for example, is a particularly auspicious fruit because it is so well represents the human head, with its 3 eyes in a hard skull-like shell, which contains a brain-like flesh and a quantity of liquid that represents the blood, hormones, cerebrospinal fluid, and other juices contained in a human head. Today's people offer coconuts in lieu of severed heads on occasions such as the full moon during August, when the citizens of Bombay go down to the sea with their coconuts to attempt to appease the rain gods and calm the monsoon's frenzy. The head has long been regarded in India as the most important part of the body. In it concentrates the power that is the excellence of existence, the essence of the universe. The head is the seat of the personality and therefore karma. Before the body can act to perform the karma, the head must direct it to act. It is by the head that we know the body. The essence of a sacrifice is in its head, the means by which the karma of recreating harmony in both the internal and external universes is performed. The more symbolic our sacrifice becomes, the less karma we need to perform. We can take the head, the chief, essential, important element, and leave the rest. To emphasize the literal in sacrifice is to maximize its karma, which limits its potential benefits. Some modern people are beginning to suggest that it is generally appropriate to worship God or the goddess with sex, alcohol, and meat, and that blood sacrifices should be performed because They are effective means of achieving our desires. Though such rituals can indeed be effective, they are rarely skillful means, for they are karmically expensive and commonly lead to intoxication and addiction instead of worship. The astral aura they generate is also likely to strengthen the will of people like the pedophiles and pushers who are already greedily consuming the flesh of the throwaway children who they sacrifice. It is true that Aghoris worship with sex, alcohol, meat, and sometimes human sacrifice, but solely for the purpose of working off their leftover runanubandhanas, not for creating new ones. They do so with full awareness of what can happen to them if they fall into self-identifications with these actions. While the law of karma may be temporarily transcended, it can no more be nullified than the law of gravity can be negated. An airplane continues to fly in violation of gravity for only so long as its engines continue to whir. Aghoris who complete their flight successfully can get from place to place very quickly and get much of their runanubandhana work done, but if their engines should stop in mid-air, down they will drop. If they do crash, they know they have themselves alone to blame. Aghoris prefer to offer their own blood in sacrifice. They ask themselves, if my beloved requires prana, why should it not be mine? In this they follow the lead of the Vedas themselves. One of the world's handful of remaining Vedacharyas is Agnihotra Ramanjun Tatracharya, whose mastery of Vedic ritual and text is truly dazzling. When we last met, he reported to me that there is a passage in the Tatriya Samhita of the Yajurveda which states that originally all sacrifice was of the sacrificer's own flesh. These first sacrificers did not expect other animals or humans to contribute on their behalf. Only after they lost their own grit did they begin to settle for substitutes. A good Aghori even today accepts no substitutes. Blood's chief task is the transport of prana, and the offering of blood to a deity is fundamentally the offering of that being's prana. Vimalananda, who always valued refinement over crudity, generally preferred to use sacrificial techniques that were subtler and less messy than the literal spilling of gore. This is the sort of penance the Tantras intend when they speak of ataryaga, meaning internal sacrificial rites. The Kaushitaki Upanishad provides an example of ataryaga in its description of inner Agnihotra. Agnihotra usually refers to worship of an external sacred fire, but the inner Agnihotra involves the offering of breath, which is another transporter of prana, as an oblation in speech when you speak, and the offering of speech as an oblation in breath when you fall silent. In this way, you can offer oblations continually as long as you continue to breathe, using your body as your sacrificial altar and your life itself as your sacrifice. A good Aghori masters the art of self-sacrifice. Good Aghoris fiercely love to consummate that action within themselves and refuse to forge it even for a moment. Instead, they take the smashan with them wherever they go, even to the race course, that their oblations need never be interrupted. What is our world, after all, but one big smashan in which each of us is already burning? For a sincere Aghori life in the internal smashan is no metaphor. Sincere Aghoris make the smashan real for them. This is a subjective internal reality, a reality that is more real to them than is the Maya outside themselves, Aghoris know that all that is not pure, unalloyed consciousness is filth. Because they do not discriminate between one variety of filth and another, they literally come to see no reason to discriminate between feces and fruit. Instead, they ignore everything except their own pertinacity to bring themselves again and again to the melting point, willingly consuming their own filth when need be, the dung becoming ambrosial when it is transmuted in the furnaces of their longing. Emotional muck, which is usually worse than the physical variety, deserves thorough immolation. The 19th verse of the Karpuradi Stotra, a hymn to Kali, states that the goddess delights in receiving in sacrifice the flesh of goat, buffalo, cat, sheep, camel, and man. Though the greedy for meat use this and similar textual references to sanction animal slaughter, what an aspirant really needs to sacrifice is his lust, which is the goat, anger, which is the buffalo, greed, which is the cat, stupefaction due to delusion, which is the sheep, envy, which is the camel, and pride and infatuation with worldly things, which is man. These thick cords that yoked us to the world must be severed if we are to truly become independent, which is swatantra. Until these limitations are sacrificed, the seeker is himself no better than an animal, which is why the Tantras call such people pashus, meaning animals. Off with your head! You can butcher all your emotional attachments in one fell swoop if you are willing to part with your head, which will be for you more of a cesspit of toxins than a reservoir of excellent essence, so long as it is polluted with your personal limitations. Severing your head can help you cast off your attachment to your individual finite self, for at the moment you perform the karma of this surrender, you sacrifice a bit of your imagined control over your life and offer some of your prana to the divine. This allows divinity access into you. Sacrifice, after all, literally means to make sacred. The Maharashtrian poet saint Tukaram said it right. If we want to enjoy God, we should lop off our head from our body and hold it in our hands. When the body has been sacrificed to God, says Tuka, all worship has been accomplished. From Tukarama Gatha 3411-3171. Tukaram speaks here of dissevering one's awareness, which is the head, from all distortions provoked by any kind of physical, mental, or other material limitations of the body. Though the ideal head offering would extinguish all limitations at once, for most of us a single donation will not suffice. Most of us are so attached to our self-definitions that we need to chop off and offer our heads daily, internally. The force of self-identification is called ahamkara. So long as it self-identifies with the actions of the body and mind into which it was born, a self-identification which monopolizes a great deal of energy. When ahamkara begins to release its self-identification with the limited, temporary personality, that portion of energy which is freed is called kundalini. The only difference between ahamkara and kundalini is the object with which they self-identify. Until kundalini is completely awakened, ahamkara will continue to act in large part as if it were the self, and whatever you do will continue to be motivated by your own self-importance and attachment to your sense of difference from the rest of the world. As you chop your awareness and prana free of ahamkara's grasp, you free them to identify with something new. When you act, you make use of your free will. To react is to conform to your fated karmas. If you really want to transform yourself, You will have to take charge of your reactions and learn how, when, and where to act. Free will is the ability to choose to remember that we set our trains of karma in motion, and that we can, by dint of repeated action, eventually change the direction of that train. Your current karmas can be negated at any moment, but only if your present force of intention is equal to the force you used to create those karmas. The key to creating and solidifying new samskaras that will negate your old ones is to repeat your new actions so often and so intently that nothing can stand in their way. If anything that you do in total selfishness tends to move you in the direction of nivritti, every karma you perform with a desire for a result is likely to lead you further into pavritri. There is no real advantage in renouncing participation in the world to which you belong until you are ready to give up self-identifying with your actions. Until ahamkara has been transformed into kundalini, you will just continue creating new runanubandhanas wherever you go. Even the desire to make karmic amends may be fraught with peril, for fighting against your residues tends to create yet more residues, and a conscious effort to repay all your runas may make you run amok. If you find the thought of rebirth distasteful, you will do well to learn how to act appropriately according to your dharma in a state of karma samya, meaning active balance, and refuse to self-identify with the performance of your duties. By reflecting on the transitory nature of existence, you can live in your family and society unfettered, like a chance guest, and forsake your attraction to the sense objects that make up your world. All bondage disappears as soon as you relinquish the idea of me and mine in all things. Realize then that smell and taste have to be given up. They are nothing but a steady flow of cravings and desires. How thus liberated could you ever think of the fishmonger's shop as stinking? Tyaga. All Vedic rituals contain three basic elements: Dravya, the material that is offered; Devata, the deity to whom it is offered; and Tyaga, the renunciation of the fruits of the ritual in favor of the deity. Tyaga is the essence of sacrifice. In Vimalananda's formula, the marma, meaning core or nucleus, of dharma is Tyaga. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna describes Tyaga, which he defines as the renouncing of the fruits of all one's activity, as life's ultimate goal. He advises Arjuna to waive his attachment to all potential results of every karma and to focus on him and him only. Abandon all other duties and come to me alone for refuge. Be not sorrowful, for I shall give you liberation from all sins. From the Bhagavad Gita. Though there is no escape from karma in this world, you can free yourself from all other karmas by assigning the fruits of all your actions to him. When you dedicate your actions to the Lord, they produce well-being in all fields of activity, just as watering the roots of a tree nourishes each of its branches. Your offering creates the runa that gives him the power to help you, to grant you his grace in return. In Vimalananda's words, a fair exchange is no robbery. Daily sacrifice of your self-importance provides daily sustenance to your deity, who after laundering it of all your vasanas, returns it to you with interest. Your soul ritual becomes a quest to see and worship him in all beings, in all places, including a racetrack, if your karmas take you there, with every exertion of body, mind, and speech. Jesus would have you follow the same path. He made himself the Passover lamb, the sacrificial first fruits of the harvest, that whoever opened themselves to him might escape the burden of their karmas. When you contract to surrender your all to Jesus or Krishna or another deity or your guru, you are in danger only if you fail to perfect your gift. A single unsurrendered karma in the causal flower bed is sufficient to seed a new forest of karmas and another string of rebirths. This hazard is easily surmounted if you are willing to extend to your devotion that commitment that Zen Buddhist abbot Harada Seki Roshi advocates when he advises his student to crave dharma like a fish that is out of water, and work as you would if your hair were on fire. From Roshi, page 77. This was the sort of commitment that the gopis, meaning milkmaids, of Vrindavana showed the Lord Krishna. Krishna said to them, "They want me with all the force of their minds. They look on me as the life of their life. For my sake they have abjured all the ties of the flesh, and I cherish and sustain those who sacrifice for me all the joys of this world and the next, and the dharma of which they are the fruit." From Srimad Bhagavata. In time when the intensity and repetition of the gopis' wholehearted devotion to Krishna had completely destroyed their vasanas, they attained Krishna and freedom. Krishna similarly saved King Parikshit. The Srimad Bhagavata is the story of how Parikshit extricates himself from the constraints of his vasanas and samskaras. His intensity is stimulated by the curse that he would die within 7 days. The repetition is provided by the story. The first half of the book uses genealogies and lineages to awaken and release Parikshit's Kundalini from its ancestral, archetypal, and transmigrational memories. The second half provides new objects for his Kundalini to attach herself to, in the form of Vishnu's avatars, meaning divine incarnations. By Book 10, which tells the tales of Lord Krishna's transcendent pastimes, Parikshit is ready to listen and to surrender. Whoever constantly contemplates Krishna merges himself completely with him. But though he is perfection personified, Purnatmaka Purushottama, Krishna is but one of the countless deity images to whom one can surrender. Vimalananda liked to speak of submission to Krishna when he spoke of surrender, because of his love for Krishna and for the Srimad Bhagavata. Tantric sadhanas can also lead to union with one's deity, but Tantric texts rarely emphasize bhakti. Vimalananda claimed that this is because, by and large, they were written by ambitious, unperfected disciples. While the texts of Tantra tend to concern themselves with karmic transactions and the achievement of results, texts on Krishna, in particular the Srimad Bhagavata, pursue the goal of unbounded bhakti. Those who can bring their karmas to equilibrium, or karma samya, on their own, should do so. Those who cannot should permit Krishna, or Shiva, or Ma, or other beloved to do it for them. Vimalananda, who was always rebelling against something or other, loved both the Tantras and the Bhakti movement for their refusal to kowtow to petrified social conventions. while the Tantras use heterodoxy as a means to their end of extracting themselves from society's conditioning, devotees of Krishna simply have no time to think of orthodoxy. To dedicate an action to me is to purify it. What is right may in certain circumstances be wrong. What is wrong may become right. The rules that declare what is right and what is wrong thus show only that the distinction is based on no intrinsic difference. Whatever a man gives up, that he is freed from. The observance of this law puts an end to sorrow, fear, and delusion, and delivers men from bondage. From Srimad Bhagavata. Vimalananda. To Vimalananda, who yearned above all else to be free from every form of bondage, the worst sort of thraldom was entanglement in the ossified ideological palabum of calculated spirituality. Brahmanical Hinduism has throughout its history sought to control potential troublemakers by defining them into harmlessness. All too often, this drive has led Indian culture to expropriate its saints. After a saint is safely dead and seemingly gone, his well-meaning devotees usurp his reputation and readjust his image and message to fit their understanding of what he was trying to teach. Most of Ramakrishna Paramahansa's disciples followed his game plan when they confiscated his memory and tailored it to suit Victorian Bengali culture, emphasizing the Vedantic aspects of his teachings while downplaying its Tantrism. Vimalananda, who loved his freedom, worked hard not to be appropriated either by Neo-Puritans or Neo-Epicureans. While he sometimes actively sought to outrage, his normal daily life was usually outrage enough. I am sure that this book will give the people in the West who have already accused him of practicing black magic, beware the dark side, new ammunition with which to attack his memory. Horse races, gambling, we are shocked, shocked. But what else should we expect from those prigs and balloon noses who are, after all, simply reacting, conforming to their karmas? What can someone who is bedeviled by concern for external purity and piety understand of someone to whom the external is merely a detail? He who lies down on the ground cannot fall, says the Srimad Bhagavata. And there is no ground further down than that of the Smashan. Every act that Vimalananda performed was a calculated excuse, a ploy to maneuver himself into a position from which he could square up some Runanubandhana or other. Inspired perhaps by the example of Lord Krishna, who certain bhakti texts describe as a sweet tug, because he would dupe people into doing what their karmic debts required them to do. Vimalananda never failed to stoop to crookery when he required it to take care of Aruna. He thus fit right into the racecourse, where everyone is crafty. You cannot speak your mind candidly to all and sundry at the racecourse and hope to win any races. This makes you crooked, but it need not make you a cheat. Life at the races is an apt allegory for life in general. On the track, or in the home or office, the best way to deal with the karmic reactions that have come due is by kala, or stratagem or finesse, not bala, brute force. Never try to force the issue, but negotiate patiently as you slip and slide your way towards extrication. Vimalananda, who characteristically preferred tact to coercion, as he navigated the ship of his life throughout the sea of his world, illustrated this point on one occasion with the following story. There was once a man who owned an old pair of sandals which had been patched so many times that they had no spot left unpatched. The man then decided that it was time to get rid of these sandals, so the next time he went to the temple for worship, he removed them and left them outside. When he came out, he deliberately neglected to pick them up, thinking that some poor person would come along and take them. But some busybody ran after him, handed them to him, and said, "You've forgotten your sandals. Don't you have any better sense?" The man walked back home, where he concluded that the best way to get rid of the sandals was simply to throw them away and let anyone pick them up. So he went directly to his window and threw them out, but they happened to land on a small child who was passing at that moment beneath his window. The child and its mother screamed so loudly that a crowd gathered. When they heard what had happened, the crowd abused the man for injuring such a dear, helpless child, and the child's mother beat the man soundly with his own sandals. Once the commotion had died down, the man sat to think the situation over. He reflected to himself, "All I wanted to do was to get rid of these old sandals, and as a result, I get both insults and a good beating. What can I do now?" Suddenly the sandals started to talk. They said, "Why are you causing such a fuss? All right, I know that I have been resoled so many times that nothing but patches remain, but all you have to do is remove all the patches and attach some good leather, and then attach a new sole, and I'll be good as new." And that is what the man did. A world of stories. Vimalananda, who patched and resold his personality whenever he wished to become good as new, made his whole life into a teaching tale. Rarely would he hesitate to hyperbolize, to drive a point home. He did, after all, sometimes describe himself as Bandal-e-Aftab, meaning the sun among exaggerators. His overstated displeasure with figures like Adi Shankaracharya and Mahatma Gandhi does not imply a lack of appreciation for their real achievements. It suggests instead an acute awareness of their imperfections, enhanced that I might not mistake the lessons they carried. He sometimes exceeded his own limits for similar purposes, and as you read his excuses for such questionable behavior, remember the many ways in which we each use self-justification to our advantage. The human brain has been compared to an attorney who will argue whatever side of a case it has been hired to argue, regardless of its merits. Once Vimalananda had divined a course of action, it was child's play for him to construct a rationale for it. Though he never succeeded in winning me over to certain of his more outlandish positions, I was always at least willing to consider being convinced by Vimalananda's arguments. Doing so facilitated free communication in the same way that rambunctiousness on my part would have obstructed it, and most of the time Vimalananda's conclusions were themselves self-evident to me. But perhaps the main reasons that I would sometimes accept the possibility of truth in an assertion so wild that coming from anyone else I would have instantly discounted it, was that his transparent sincerity. In Aghora, lack of heart is very dangerous, and Vimalananda was a child at heart until his dying day. His love for everyone around him was so genuine and childlike that many people took mean advantage of him, which eventually made him aware enough to humans that a certain external trickiness came to seem to him prudent. What seems to me prudent is to accept his stories for what they are and allow the heart to extract from them their vital essence. A good tale is such a useful tool because even if it suggests nothing to you when you first hear it, it can mature within your consciousness into a form that in due time may begin to communicate with you. Like many other teachers of traditional Indian wisdom, Vimalananda preferred to teach in stories, some of which speaks to the deepest levels of human awareness. There were times when Vimalananda would be trying to explain to me something exceptionally esoteric, like the relationship between the causal body, the chromosome pattern, and the Jnanadriya Karmadriya Nyaya, meaning the law of the sense organs of cognition and those of action, and how the Jnanadriya Karmadriya Nyaya controls fertilization and impregnation, that everything would begin to go far over my head. Then he would suddenly shift his discourse into a story instead. Though at the time he delivered it in the story, it often seemed to have little connection with the topic at hand. The truth of their connectedness would indeed gradually begin to arise within me as it all sank in. Even with time, of course, some myth-packed narratives never reveal themselves fully, even when they seem most nailed down. When you read in Chapter 1 the story of Prithviraj Chauhan, for instance, please remember that there was a time when it was common practice in India at the start of a construction project to drive a nail or stake into the head of Sheshanaga, the gargantuan serpent who supports the world. The structure's cornerstone would be laid above the snake's head, thus placing it at the exact center of the world. Mircea Eliade has traced this tradition to the primordial gesture of Indra when he struck the snake in his lair. From the Rig Veda, when his lightning bolt cut off its head. To transfix or behead the snake is to pass from the virtual and amorphous to the formed and organized, to concretize a potential karma's causation stream in time and space. Properly fastened karmas churned out well-tempered, benefic effects. Shisha means in Sanskrit, that which remains, not in the sense of someone's leavings, but rather a background or setting, a matrix, which so complements an item that without it, that item would be incomplete. When you dig a well on your property, you may value the well for its water, but the condition of the ground that forms the remainder of your property will govern how valuable that well will be to you. Your well draws its water from your property's shisha. Change those surroundings and you change the well. Like a wisely dug well, a story whose stake stretches down into Shishanaga's head taps into its own shisha, the inexhaustible waters of living myth, which will continue to stream into it so long as that stake remains in place. Vimalananda rarely met a story he didn't like, and he freely adapted many of them for his purposes. In this, he was but following tradition, for recycling legend is an ancient and respected practice in India. In Vimalananda's world, no story was a good one unless it possessed at least 7 layers of meaning, and he would tinker with his stories until they did. You can, if you like, compare Vimalananda's version of the story of Sumanda with that of the Srimad Bhagavata, and find in the Sanskrit text known as the Panchatantra versions of at least 2 tales that Vimalananda ascribed to Akbar and Birbal, that of the unlucky one-eyed washerman, and that of the man who claims to be able to go to heaven by getting his old body burned. Vimalananda, who had done an MA in Mughal history, was particularly fond of tales of Akbar and Birbal, many of which continue to be told for fun and profit all over North India. He added some of the better known of these to his repertoire, and possessed others that seemed to be known only to him. These may have been gleaned from some obscure oral tradition, or he may have deliberately created them as teaching tools. If so, he would not have been the first to do so. This book, which I crafted with the same sort of heedfulness that we used to craft our winners at the track, is an episode into the personal saga of the Aghori Vimalananda. This introduction represents a slice of the book's shisha. As you turn now into the narrative, please release any need you might have to perfectly understand the literal meanings of its words, and sometimes esoteric reasoning. Open yourself, rather, to the words. Let them course through you in their own way, and they will surely deliver to you their message.